Shut your mouth, girl. You don't belong in that uniform. You think you're one of them heroes? Step aside before I show you what happens to people like you. Before we start the story, tell me, where are you watching from? And if these stories speak to you, make sure to hit that subscribe button. The morning sun barely cut through the heat, rising off the asphalt, when Dr. Tasha Reynolds stepped onto the base parking lot. Her uniform crisp, metals reflecting the light, her boots clicking with every step. She had seen the worst of humanity, stitched people back from the edge, saved lives that nobody else could. But none of that mattered to Officer Ryan Holt. He spotted her from across the lot, and the instant he recognized her skin against that uniform, his face twisted into something cruel, like he already owned the right to decide if she lived or died. Shut your mouth, girl. You don't belong in that uniform. You think you're one of them heroes? Step aside before I show you what happens to people like you. He barked, spit flying, his hand hovering over his weapon. Tasha stopped cold. Her heart slammed against her chest, but she refused to flinch, refused to let him see the fear she felt inside. She kept her voice steady, sharp, like a scalpel. She knew how to wield. "Sir, I'm just walking to my car. There's no problem here." But Holt wasn't listening. He didn't want to hear it. The hate radiating off him was thicker than the summer heat, blinding him to everything except his belief that she didn't belong, that her very existence in uniform was an insult he had the right to erase. Ava, 10 years old, clutched the strap of her backpack, frozen, eyes wide, stomach twisting. She had seen her mom in action countless times, calm in chaos, fearless in surgeries that would terrify most adults. But she had never seen her mom like this, cornered by someone who saw her as less than human, a threat to his fragile ego. Ava's little body shook as the woods hung in the air, soaked in venom. Her mom's calm voice did nothing to soothe the growing storm that Holt was letting loose. Holt stepped closer, chest puffed, like Tasha's medals offended him personally. "I don't care how many damn medals you got. You ain't one of us. You ain't safe in that uniform. You hear me? You don't belong here, girl." His eyes were wild, twitching with a mix of superiority and fear of someone he couldn't control. Every word carried centuries of hate, a lifetime of thinking black people weren't meant to hold power, to hold authority, to exist in places meant for people like him. And then, in a heartbeat, the world snapped. His hand went to his gun. Tasha barely had time to react, and the shot rang out. Ava screamed, a high-pitched wail that tore through the morning air. Tasha stumbled, blood blossoming over her uniform, the Star of Valor pin catching the light like a mocking symbol of everything he wanted to erase. The cop didn't hesitate, his fingers still tight on the trigger, his eyes cold, satisfaction creeping across his face, as if he had just corrected an injustice that had no business existing. People around started screaming, pulling out phones, recording the horror. Every click, every lens caught the raw, unfiltered racism in action. The title practically wrote itself. Racist cops shot a black Army surgeon, then the U.S. Army ended their careers instantly. And the thumbnail? That line he screamed, frozen in time. "Shut your mouth now." That wasn't just an outburst, it was the embodiment of hate, of someone who saw a black woman in power and felt the need to annihilate her to protect his fragile supremacy. Ava dropped to her knees beside her mom, hands shaking, trying to stop the blood, trying to make sense of a world where heroes could be murdered in plain sight just because of the color of their skin. Her sobs mingled with the chaos, the curse words flying, the panic and terror that gripped everyone nearby. And the cop, he still stood there, chest heaving, eyes wild, like he had just passed judgment, like he believed the world agreed with him. But the cameras didn't lie. The phones didn't lie. The world was watching. Social media erupted. Clips circulated, shocking people from coast to coast. Veterans, civilians, soldiers' families, they all saw the same thing. A decorated Black Army surgeon gunned down because one man decided her skin and uniform were a threat. The outrage was instant, visceral. Comments poured in, disbelief, fury, heartbreak, and somewhere deep inside Ava, a fear that no hashtag could erase was taking root. The knowledge that hate could strike in a heartbeat, that even heroes weren't safe when the world still saw them as less than. The army, watching from their headquarters, couldn't ignore it. The title of the story wasn't just a clickbait line. It was reality. Holt's actions, laid bare for everyone to see, forced them to act fast. Investigations were launched, officers suspended, public statements issued. The system had to respond, because this wasn't just a shooting. It was a public display of the raw, unfiltered racism still bleeding through authority. The justice wasn't immediate enough to heal Ava, but it was a statement. Black heroes belong in that uniform, and anyone trying to take that away would face consequences. Even as Tasha's body was taken to the medics, even as Ava was pulled into someone's arms, sobbing uncontrollably, the bitter truth lingered. The world saw the viral footage, the clickbait title, the shocking thumbnail. But none of that could erase the fear, the trauma, the blatant hatred that had almost taken her mom's life. Holt's words, "Shut your mouth now. You don't belong in that uniform," would echo forever. A reminder that heroism and courage aren't always enough when someone decides you're undeserving. And that was the cruelest lesson. Society could celebrate her achievements, post about her medals, cry at the injustice, but one person's racism had still left scars that no viral video could ever erase. The story wasn't just about her death or the outrage that followed. It was about a system that still allowed people to decide who belongs, who doesn't, and who they feel entitled to destroy. Ava didn't understand all that yet. She only knew that her mom had been attacked for existing, and the fear, the anger, and the heartbreak were hers to carry. The moment the shot rang out, the world tilted sideways for Ava. Her hands were shaking, her lungs burning, but she couldn't look away. Her mom, Dr. Tasha Reynolds, was lying there, blood spreading across the pavement, like someone had spilled crimson paint on perfection. The cop, Ryan Holt, didn't even flinch, standing there like he'd just proven a point that nobody asked for, but somehow felt entitled to. His chest heaved, eyes still wild, as if he'd just shown the universe who had the real power. Ava crawled to her mom, sobbing, slamming her little hands against Tasha's chest. "Mom, Mom, wake up!" Her voice cracked, the sound raw and unbearable, echoing across the lot. People were screaming, pulling out phones, trying to call 911, shouting at Holt to do something, anything. But he didn't move. He didn't care. The hate in his eyes was thick enough to taste. The kind of racism that didn't blink, that didn't think twice about what he'd done. Tasha groaned, one hand weakly reaching toward Ava, trying to reassure her, even in the pain. "Ava, it's okay. I'm here." But every second was stolen by fear, by the harsh reality of a world where a black woman, even in full uniform, could be gunned down because a cop decided her life wasn't his problem. Ava's tears streamed uncontrollably, soaking the back of her mom's shirt. Around them, chaos erupted. Witnesses screamed, some yelling at Holt, others trying to shield Ava, but no one could stop the ugly truth of what just happened. And then the phones came out. Clips of the shooting went live within minutes. Social media blew up like a bomb going off. The thumbnail practically screamed Holt's words, "Shut your mouth now." The title, "Racist Cops Shot a Black Army Surgeon, Then the U.S. Army Ended Their Careers Instantly," flashed across feeds, drawing clicks, outrage, disbelief. People were typing in all caps, spitting fury, crying, sharing, and resharing. Veterans, civilians, soldiers' families, everyone saw the same horrifying reality. A decorated Black Army hero was shot at point-blank range by someone who thought she didn't belong. Paramedics arrived, rushing to stabilize Tasha. But Ava didn't want to let go. Her little arms wrapped around her mom, sobs choking out words she couldn't form. The hate in Holt's eyes was still there, lingering like a shadow that refused to leave. And as the medics pulled Tasha into the ambulance, Holt still stood there, smirking slightly, proud in a way that made people's blood boil. He had shown what he believed, that skin could override bravery, medals, or humanity. The base erupted with whispers, murmurs of shock and anger. Soldiers gathered, some fuming, some frozen, unable to comprehend how someone could shoot a black officer, a black surgeon, a black mother in cold blood. The news crews arrived, cameras rolling, capturing the rawest footage of Ava screaming, of Tasha's uniform soaked red, of Holt standing there like he had a right to erase a life. Comments and posts flooded the internet, and within hours, hashtags were trending everywhere. Justice for Tasha, Stop Police Racism, Black Army Hero. The outrage was tangible, raw, and fast, but the fear remained thick in Ava's chest. Even as the story spread, people debated. Some couldn't believe it. How could this happen? A decorated army surgeon shot. Others, unfortunately, nodded in grim familiarity, remembering the countless times prejudice had cost black lives. But what hit Ava hardest wasn't the debates. It was the knowledge that the man who almost killed her mom had walked up to her and told her she didn't belong in the first place. "You don't belong," he had said. Not just words, but a death sentence disguised in authority. The army didn't stay silent. Within hours, officials addressed the incident publicly, condemning the shooting, promising swift justice. The title of the viral video wasn't clickbait anymore. It was reality. Officers suspended, investigations launched, Holt's career now hanging by a thread. The system was forced to act, the world watching every move. Yet Ava, clutching her mom's hand as they wheeled her into the ambulance, only felt fear. Justice or not, the hatred she'd just seen would haunt her forever. And as the ambulance doors slammed, as sirens wailed and the crowd parted, the city seemed to hold its breath. The story of Tasha Reynolds wasn't just about a shooting. It was a brutal, unfiltered look at racism in uniform. The world was angry, shocked, and watching. But the little girl who had to witness it all would carry the trauma long after headlines faded. Holt's words, "Shut your mouth, girl, you don't belong in that uniform," weren't just a one-time attack. They were a statement of centuries of prejudice that still lived, breathed, and killed in 2025. Even in that chaos, Ava felt something fierce stirring inside her. Rage, grief, a stubborn sense of justice she didn't yet understand but would grow into. The story was far from over. The public outrage was just the first chapter. The Army's intervention was just the start. And Holt, he was about to learn that the world wasn't going to let him erase Tasha Reynolds. Not now, not ever. By the time news crews and social media posts hit every corner of the internet, the footage of Tasha Reynolds lying in the parking lot was already everywhere. Phones buzzed in pockets, alerts screamed from every screen, and the thumbnail froze the moment Ryan Holt barked, "Shut your mouth, girl. You don't belong in that uniform." It wasn't just a clip. It was a slap in the face to everyone who still believed in fairness, decency, and the idea that bravery mattered more than skin color. People scrolled past, double-tapping in disbelief, some screaming at the screen, others crying, their stomachs knotting tight. The story went viral so fast, it felt like the entire country had hit pause just to watch the horror unfold. Comments poured in, people arguing in caps lock about justice, morality, and systemic racism. Veterans typed out heartfelt posts acknowledging the courage Tasha showed every day and the danger she faced simply existing in her uniform. Civilians, some who didn't know military ranks from a canteen line, still felt the gut-punch reality. A decorated black woman, a hero in every right, almost murdered because one man couldn't handle seeing her succeed. News anchors didn't sugarcoat it. Footage played non-stop, reporters leaning into the camera with grim faces. A decorated Army surgeon, Tasha Reynolds, shot at point-blank range by an on-duty police officer. The words dripped from the screen, each syllable carrying weight. The public wasn't just angry, they were outraged, and the outrage wasn't mild. It was raw, burning, a collective scream that this wasn't just an accident or a mistake. It was racism, naked and brutal, parading itself on national television. Memes started appearing almost immediately, not mocking the tragedy, but highlighting the injustice. People overlaid Holt's face with bold captions, "You don't belong," paired with Tasha's medals, screenshots of the moment she fought for her life, viral clips from veterans honoring her bravery. The juxtaposition stung. Here was someone who literally saved lives, and yet the system, or at least one person in it, tried to erase her worth in seconds. Ava stayed glued to her mom's side at the hospital, exhausted, bloodshot eyes scanning the chaos outside. She could hear the reporters, the whispers, the flashbulbs clicking, but inside, all she felt was fear. Her mom, heroic as ever, weakly gripped her hand, offering a soft squeeze as if to say, "You're gonna be all right, baby. Stay strong." But Ava couldn't shake the words of Holt from her mind. "You don't belong in that uniform." It wasn't just about her mom anymore. It was about every black person who'd ever been made to feel like they were trespassing in a space that wasn't meant for them. Social media didn't just amplify the story. It blew up into debates, fiery threads, and heated arguments across platforms. Some tried to defend Holt, calling it a tragic accident, or claiming he panicked. But most people weren't buying it. They saw the video, felt the fear in Ava's scream, the bravery in Tasha's eyes even after the shot, and recognized a pattern. Racism masked as authority, violence disguised as control. People were posting articles, videos, and personal testimonies, each one reinforcing the narrative. Black heroes are still targets, even when they're wearing the uniform of the nation. Meanwhile, the Army issued a statement, firm and sharp. They promised an immediate investigation and reassured the public that justice would be served. The title of the viral clip, "Racist Cops Shot a Black Army Surgeon, then the U.S. Army Ended Their Careers Instantly," wasn't just hype. It reflected reality. Within hours, officers were suspended, investigations were underway, and Holt's actions were already under review. Social media users pointed this out too, emphasizing that accountability, while slow in some cases, had started moving fast here. But the fear wasn't gone. Ava's eyes stayed wide as she watched Tasha being stabilized by the medical team. Every phone recording, every news broadcast, every viral clip reminded her that one person's hatred could nearly end her mom's life. She saw comments calling Holt a coward and racist pig, but that didn't erase the terror in her chest. The world might have seen the injustice, might have recognized the bravery, but it couldn't undo the fact that a Black Army hero had been shot in cold blood in front of her child. By evening, the story had spread internationally. Headlines ran in major newspapers. Cable news played the footage repeatedly, and the thumbnail, Holt's words, frozen mid-scream, became the symbol of the nation confronting its deep-seated racism. People shared posts across borders. Imagine saving lives for your country and getting shot by someone who thinks your skin makes you a threat. The outrage was universal, yet personal. It forced the world to stare at the ugly truth that Black Americans, even heroes, still had to fight for the right to exist without fear. And through it all, Ava held tight to her mom. The chaos outside, the viral clips, the endless debate, it all blurred into one overwhelming storm. But she remembered one thing clearly. Her mom fought every day, not just on the battlefield, but in life, in every surgery, in every act of courage. Holt's hate didn't win that day, not completely. The world saw him for what he was, and the Army's swift action reminded everyone that bravery, honor, and courage couldn't be erased by one man's prejudice, no matter how raw and violent it was. As night fell, Ava finally rested her head against Tasha's chest, exhausted but aware. The media frenzy, the viral outrage, the nation reacting, they were part of a larger story. One about bravery, yes, but also about the racism that lurked in authority, the fear that Black heroes live with every day, and the resilience it took just to survive in a world that tried to tell you you didn't belong. Holt's words still echoed, chilling and cruel, but now they were documented, shared, and condemned, leaving the cop no choice but to face the consequences of his blind, racist rage. ... People kept talking about Tasha Reynolds, but most of them didn't know the half of it. She wasn't just some uniformed figure getting shot in a parking lot. She was a decorated Army surgeon, a Black woman who had faced every kind of danger the military could throw at her, and had saved lives that nobody else could touch. Her Star of Valor wasn't just a medal. It was proof she'd been on the front lines, stitching soldiers back from death, pulling people through trauma that would make lesser doctors quit, crying in the hallways. And yet, all that courage, all that proof of bravery, meant nothing to Ryan Holt. To him, her skin erased every life she'd saved, every medal she'd earned, every heroic moment she'd ever lived. Before that morning, Tasha had been a force of nature. She had joined the Army straight out of med school, eyes blazing with purpose, and she had never backed down. Combat zones, disaster zones, emergency surgeries under fire, she did it all. There were stories whispered in the mess halls, stories of her saving lives while bullets whizzed by, stories of her calm hands fixing what fear and chaos tried to destroy. Fellow soldiers spoke of her with reverence, civilians with awe. And Holt, he didn't see any of that. He saw a Black woman daring to exist in a space he thought wasn't hers. Ava, still clinging to her mother in the hospital room, didn't need anyone to explain Tasha's legacy. She had grown up watching it. She'd sat in the corner during long nights at the base, when her mom's pager went off. Seen her pack up in seconds and leave for emergencies no one else would touch. She'd heard the stories her mom told when she got home, trying to soften the world's cruelty with humor. But Ava knew the truth. Tasha was extraordinary. And today, extraordinary wasn't enough to protect her from the pure, unfiltered hate of a man who couldn't stomach her presence. The news media didn't ignore her past. Headlines screamed it across TV screens and social feeds. Decorated Army surgeon shot in cold blood. Black hero targeted by racist cop. Community and Army outraged. Videos replayed moments from her career, showing Tasha in scrubs, in combat gear, in emergency rooms, with trembling hands, trusting her to save lives. People were starting to understand the cruelty of what happened. This wasn't just a random shooting. It was a deliberate act by someone who thought her skin, her power, her competence was a threat. Even as reporters chronicled her life, Holt's actions were laid bare, making the contrast painfully clear. The public saw the footage of him yelling, "Shut your mouth, girl. You don't belong in that uniform," and juxtaposed it with pictures of Tasha stitching wounds on the battlefield, comforting scared soldiers, mentoring young black recruits who needed a hero they could actually see. The disparity made people sick to their stomachs. How could one man's prejudice outweigh a lifetime of courage and sacrifice? Ava watched the news clips on mute, just staring at the screen, soaking in every frame of her mom's achievements. She knew what the world saw now, but it didn't erase what she had felt that morning. The terror, the hate, the sheer weight of someone wanting her mom dead just for existing. It still sat heavy in her chest. And the world, for all its outrage and viral posts, couldn't fully comprehend what it was like to be a child, seeing the person who'd always been your safe place, almost ripped from existence. The Army, meanwhile, started highlighting Tasha's accolades in official statements. They couldn't ignore the optics. The cops' blatant racism against a decorated hero was too public, too viral, too undeniable. Holt's career was now dangling, investigations moving at lightning speed. The world was watching, judging, and the narrative was shifting. Tasha Reynolds wasn't the victim because she failed. She was a hero, and the man who tried to erase her greatness was the villain. But the trauma lingered. Ava couldn't stop reliving the words Holt had yelled, echoing in her ears with each news report and social post. "You don't belong in that uniform." Every medal, every accolade, every heroic act was proof of her mom's worth. But in that moment, the world felt like it was stacked against them. The story wasn't just about fame or recognition. It was about proving that even a hero could be targeted by pure, unfiltered hatred. And Tasha, even in the hospital bed, was a living testament to resilience. She survived, barely, but the lesson was clear. Courage and bravery don't erase racism. They confront it, they endure it, and sometimes they survive it against all odds. Across the nation, people started using Tasha's story to fight back. Black officers, black surgeons, even civilians shared her story, not as sensational news, but as proof that the world needed to wake up. Holt's words, captured for eternity in the viral video, became a symbol of systemic hatred, a warning of what Black Americans still face every day, even when they're heroes in the eyes of their country. People were angry, they were scared, and they were motivated. The viral outrage wasn't just about clicks, it was about accountability, recognition, and forcing a system that often looked away to finally see what had happened. ... And through it all, Ava held her mom's hand, witnessing both the weight of her mother's past and the fear of the present. Tasha's career, her life of service, her countless heroic acts, They hadn't protected her from hate, but they were proof that black excellence existed even in the face of danger. Holt's actions were reprehensible, but the world now had a choice. Either ignore Tasha's legacy, as he tried to erase it, or recognize it, celebrate it, and demand justice. For Ava, the lesson was clear. Her mom's bravery was unmatched, but the fight against hate was ongoing. And sometimes it came with a price that even heroes had to pay. By the next morning, Tasha Reynolds' story had completely blown up. Social media wasn't just buzzing, it was screaming. Every feed, every timeline, every news alert carried the same horrifying footage of Ryan Holt yelling, "Shut your mouth, girl! You don't belong in that uniform." It wasn't just a headline anymore. It was a symbol of raw, unfiltered hate that had taken root in authority. People were furious, and the outrage wasn't polite. It was visceral, loud, angry, and impossible to ignore. The media ran non-stop coverage, highlighting Tasha's heroic career, the star of valor on her chest, and the sheer audacity of Holt's racist outburst. News anchors, with grim faces and shaking voices, explained how a black army surgeon, a decorated hero, had been targeted for no reason other than her skin. The clips of Ava screaming beside her mom played repeatedly, forcing viewers to confront the human cost of prejudice. Every play, every share, every comment was a reminder. Racism didn't care how many medals you earned, how many lives you saved, or how much courage you carried. Across cities, communities erupted. People gathered outside local precincts, chanting, holding signs, "Justice for Tasha," "Black Lives Matter," "No more racist cops." The hashtag Justice for Tasha trended worldwide. The anger was relentless because everyone watching could feel it. The injustice, the blatant disregard for life, the sheer arrogance of a man who thought he had the right to decide who belonged and who didn't. Holt's words became a mantra of hate, repeated across forums, news coverage, and social media. But instead of empowering him, they fueled the fury of a nation, ready to see him held accountable. Inside the army, officials were already in motion. Holt's actions, captured so clearly on video, forced immediate internal investigations. Statements poured out. "This is unacceptable. We're reviewing all facts. Accountability will be enforced." Within hours, Holt and the other officers present were suspended. It was fast, but for Ava and everyone who had witnessed the shooting, it wasn't fast enough. The anger simmered. The fear lingered. It wasn't just a cop acting alone. It was a representation of systemic bias, of centuries of people deciding black lives were worth less. Journalists interviewed soldiers, veterans, civilians, and advocates. Each voice added weight to the outrage. They talked about Tasha's incredible achievements, her life-saving work, and how utterly senseless the shooting was. One veteran said on camera, voice shaking with disbelief, "She saved more lives than most of us could count. And this guy? He thought her skin made her a threat. It's sickening." The public could feel the raw emotion through the screen. The narrative was clear. A black hero had been targeted for her existence, and the system was finally, visibly responding. Ava watched it all from her hospital bed. The news, the endless debates, the hashtags. It was overwhelming, but it also offered a strange kind of comfort. People were angry, yes, but they were angry with the right target. They were recognizing the truth. Holt's hatred, exposed in full color, was being condemned, shared, and discussed. Every media outlet covering the story reminded Ava that her mom's heroism wasn't going unnoticed. and that society, finally, was starting to hold the perpetrators accountable. Meanwhile, online activists dissected every frame of the viral video. The exact moment Holt shouted his racist tirade, the seconds leading up to the gunshot, Tasha's reaction, they broke it all down. People were calling it an example of systemic racism in law enforcement, a microcosm of what Black Americans still face daily. The public conversation wasn't just about this one shooting anymore. It was about the pattern, the prejudice, the decades of ignoring Black excellence and targeting Black life. Holt's words, frozen in that video clip, became the ultimate symbol of what millions had endured quietly for far too long. The pressure on the Army increased as the hours passed. Public statements were no longer enough. People demanded tangible action. Holt's superiors faced questions, reporters screaming live into cameras about accountability, justice, and whether officers like him should even have a badge. The viral video was a weapon, exposing racism in a way that words alone couldn't. For once, the system was forced to respond under the glare of national outrage. Yet even with the world watching, Ava's personal trauma was far from over. She replayed Holt's words in her head, his sneer, his sense of entitlement to take her mother's life. Every media clip, every social media post was a reminder of how close hate had come to destroying her family. And while the outrage offered some hope, it couldn't erase the terror she had felt that morning, the raw fear of seeing someone she loved targeted, just for existing. Across communities, discussions erupted in living rooms, classrooms, and workplaces. People debated systemic change, police reform, racial bias, and the invisibility of Black heroes in authority. Activists emphasized that Tasha's story was just one of countless examples of Black Americans excelling, serving, and being attacked simply for daring to exist in spaces they'd earned through bravery and sacrifice. Holt's actions, once isolated, now symbolized centuries of hate, inequality, and violence masked as authority. As night fell, the viral storm continued. Ava finally allowed herself a brief rest, eyes drooping, clinging to her mom's hand. But the words, the fear, the injustice, they lingered. Holt's hatred had been exposed. The nation was watching, and accountability was in motion. But the story wasn't just about viral outrage. It was about reminding everyone that heroes, Black heroes, often face the ultimate test, not in battlefields or operating rooms, but in the face of people who refuse to see their worth. And Tasha Reynolds, even injured and recovering, represented both the vulnerability and the resilience of every Black life targeted by blind, systemic hate. By the next morning, the Army's investigation was in full swing. Ryan Holt, the cop who'd screamed, "Shut your mouth, girl, you don't belong in that uniform," at Tasha Reynolds, was facing scrutiny unlike anything he'd ever experienced. His name was plastered across headlines, trending on social media, and in conversations from coast to coast. What had started as a horrific shooting had now spiraled into a full-blown national scandal, a case study in racism caught red-handed. Every move Holt made, every statement or lack thereof, was being dissected. The world wasn't just watching, it was judging. Inside the Army's internal offices, investigators worked tirelessly. Footage from bystanders, base security cameras, and even body cams was pieced together frame by frame. Holt's actions weren't just reckless, they were deliberate, fueled by a deep-seated hatred that refused to hide behind the badge he wore. Emails and statements from fellow officers were collected, some expressing shock, others shame. The investigation wasn't just about the shooting. It was about proving systemic failure and the lethal consequences of unchecked prejudice in positions of authority. Meanwhile, Ava sat in the hospital room, exhaustion making her eyelids heavy, but her mind racing nonstop. She'd watched news coverage, social media reactions, and interviews with veterans praising her mom. Every time Holt's name popped up, every time someone replayed his words frozen in that viral clip, a shiver ran down her spine. The fear that had gripped her the morning of the shooting hadn't gone away. It had only evolved. Now it was tied to the uncertainty of justice. Would he face real consequences? Or would his racism slide under the radar, another unchecked act in a long history of systemic bias? The Army didn't waste time. Within hours, Holt and the other officers involved were officially suspended pending investigation. It was fast, precise, a clear message that the military couldn't tolerate this level of blatant hate against one of their own. Social media erupted again, people applauding the swift action, but also demanding that accountability didn't stop at suspension. Everyone wanted charges, legal consequences, and a system that made sure Holt would never have the chance to target another black life in uniform. The public's outrage didn't fade. Online, people were calling out the local police department for hiring someone like Holt, questioning training standards, racial sensitivity, and recruitment practices. Activists highlighted patterns, linking Holt's actions to historical precedents where black officers or civilians were attacked simply for existing in spaces of power. The video of Holt shouting his racist words at Tasha Reynolds had become a textbook example of the lethal consequences of prejudice when it goes unchecked. Inside Ava's mind, the words still echoed relentlessly. "You don't belong in that uniform." Every time she heard news anchors talk about Holt's suspension, her stomach twisted. Justice was in motion, yes, but it didn't erase the terror, the trauma, or the fact that her mom had almost been killed by someone who saw her worth as less than human. Each media report, each trending hashtag, each comment on social media was a reminder that society was finally noticing. But the fear lingered. Holt had nearly destroyed their lives, and it was a bitter pill to swallow that it had taken viral footage for action to occur. Veterans and military officials weighed in publicly. Retired generals, black officers, and civil rights advocates all condemned Holt's actions. They spoke in terms that couldn't be ignored. The officers' behavior wasn't just reckless, it was racially motivated. A stark example of the prejudice black service members still face. Their statements were broadcast nationwide, adding pressure to the ongoing investigation. Every word highlighted the contrast between Tasha Reynolds' heroic career and Holt's toxic, violent hatred, making the public see the injustice in painfully sharp relief. Even in the hospital, Ava felt the ripple effects of this exposure. Calls poured in from friends, family, and concerned citizens. The Army was being watched closely. Holt's superiors questioned, and the story was dominating every major outlet. People were angry, scared, and demanding justice. And while the world rallied for her mom, Ava realized that the struggle wasn't just about viral outrage. It was about creating a system where black heroes could exist without the fear of being targeted simply for their skin. Holt's attorneys scrambled, trying to spin the story, claiming panic, self-defense, or misjudgment. But no spin could erase the video. No excuse could remove the words that had been shouted with hate, frozen in time for the entire world to see. "Shut your mouth, girl. You don't belong in that uniform." Those words weren't just cruel. They were dangerous, a declaration of supremacy that had nearly ended a black life. And now, exposed for the world to see, Holt's career was on the line, his reputation shredded, and the nation demanding consequences. As night fell, Ava finally let herself rest against her mom, her small body exhausted, but her mind still racing. The investigation, the suspension, the national outrage, it all mattered, but the fear of what hatred could do didn't disappear. Holt had shown her that prejudice wasn't abstract, wasn't distant. It could reach into the lives of heroes, children, and families in an instant. And even though justice was in motion, the lesson was chilling. Bravery, heroism, and medals couldn't protect you from someone whose hatred ran deep and unchecked. But there was hope, too. Tasha Reynolds' life, her career, her courage, it had sparked something bigger than herself. The public outrage, the viral video, the Army's swift response, they all sent a message. Black heroes belong in that uniform, and anyone trying to erase that fact would be held accountable. Holt's words, frozen in viral infamy, had backfired. Instead of silencing Tasha, they exposed his racism and strengthened the resolve of a nation demanding justice. The courtroom was packed, cameras flashing, reporters scribbling notes, and the air thick with tension. Ryan Holt walked in, suit pressed, but eyes wild. A man who still couldn't comprehend how one viral video could dismantle his career in a heartbeat. Across from him, the Reynolds family sat with quiet determination, Tasha leaning on Ava for support, both aware that this trial wasn't just about punishment. It was about making a statement that black heroes wouldn't be erased by hate. The title that had gone viral weeks ago, "Racist Cops Shot a Black Army Surgeon, Then the U.S. Army Ended Their Careers Instantly," was still trending online, and the thumbnail of Holt screaming at Tasha haunted every screen. The world was watching, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. The prosecution laid it out immediately. Every frame of the viral footage, every security camera clip, and every witness account was presented. The words, "Shut your mouth, girl. You don't belong in that uniform," echoed in the courtroom. Played over speakers so the jury, the media, and everyone present could feel the hatred that had almost killed Tasha. The attorneys hammered the point home. This wasn't a simple case of panic or misunderstanding. Holt's actions were deliberate, racially motivated, and dangerous. He had targeted a black woman in uniform, disregarded human life, and tried to assert his own supremacy through violence. Ava sat with her hands clenched, heart racing, as she watched the defense scramble. Holt's lawyers tried every tactic: panic, misinterpretation, claims that their client had been confused or frightened. But the video didn't lie. Holt's words, the tone, the intent, it was all there, captured in brutal, undeniable clarity. Social media had already judged him, and now the courtroom had to do the same. Witness after witness testified to the fear, the hatred, and the blatant racism displayed that day. Soldiers, civilians, and Tasha herself recounted the event with harrowing detail, reminding everyone in the room exactly how close Ava had come to losing her mom forever. Outside the courtroom, protests continued. People carried signs, chanted Tasha's name, and demanded accountability. The hashtag Justice for Tasha wasn't just trending online. It was being shouted in streets, plastered on news tickers, and plastered across social media feeds. Communities rallied, not just for Tasha, but for every black person who had ever been told they didn't belong in spaces they'd earned through courage, skill, and sacrifice. The story wasn't just about one shooting anymore. It was about the system and the fact that raw, unchecked racism could still manifest violently in 2025. Inside the courtroom, the tension was suffocating. Every juror watched the footage, every word, every gesture, and the sheer audacity of Holt's actions. The prosecution didn't just present evidence. They painted a picture of systemic failure, a culture of prejudice that allowed a man to think he had the right to erase a black life with impunity. The defense's arguments were feeble, their attempts to spin fear or confusion crumbling under the weight of undeniable proof. Every time Holt opened his mouth, people heard the arrogance, the denial, and the dangerous entitlement that had led him to aim a gun at Tasha Reynolds. Ava sat silently, absorbing it all. The fear that had gripped her the morning of the shooting lingered, but now it was mixed with something else. Pride. Her mom had survived. Her mom had faced hate and lived to tell the story. And now the system was finally responding in a way that reflected her bravery. But there was still tension, because the law could move slowly, and Holt's entitlement, arrogance, and the fact that some people in positions of power still tolerated racism reminded her that justice wasn't guaranteed. Media coverage amplified every moment. Clips of the courtroom, sound bites of the video, and commentary from veterans and civil rights activists filled every screen. People debated, cried, and shared their own experiences of prejudice. Holt's defense attorney tried to argue that the viral video was being overinterpreted, but the internet and the nation weren't buying it. Everyone who had seen the footage knew exactly what happened. And the rage wasn't just emotional, it was righteous, demanding accountability. The Army also continued its internal proceedings. Holt's suspension remained in effect, with officials confirming that termination was likely once the legal case concluded. The dual pressure from the legal system and the public eye was relentless. Holt's arrogance, which had fueled the shooting in the first place, now became his greatest vulnerability. The world had seen him for what he was, a man driven by racial hatred who thought he could get away with murder. As the trial dragged on, Ava clung to her mom, sometimes sobbing quietly, sometimes staring intently at the footage replayed in court. Every word from the prosecution, every witness account, every image of Holt shouting at Tasha reminded her of the danger they had faced. But it also reminded her of something else: the courage of her mom, the support of the community, and the fact that hatred, no matter how raw, could be exposed, condemned, and held accountable. By the end of the first week of testimony, the nation had made its opinion clear. Online petitions surged, protests continued, and social media was ablaze with condemnation. Holt was no longer just a cop accused of a crime. He was the embodiment of the racism Black Americans face daily. Even when they are heroes, mothers, and servants to their country, the words he shouted, captured in viral infamy, had transformed him into a cautionary tale. Authority without accountability, prejudice unchecked, and hatred left to fester could destroy lives in seconds. But now, it would also destroy careers and reputations in a public spectacle of justice. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled, and cameras flashing as the judge prepared to deliver the verdict. Ryan Holt sat with an air of arrogance that had long since cracked, his eyes darting nervously, knowing the entire nation had already seen what he had done. The viral clip of him yelling, "Shut your mouth, girl! You don't belong in that uniform," still haunted every screen, every social feed, every conversation across the country. And now, finally, the moment that would decide whether justice would catch up to his raw, unfiltered hate had arrived. The jury filed in, silence descending like a heavy curtain over the room. Ava clutched her mom's hand, knees trembling, stomach twisting with fear and anticipation. Tasha, though still weak from her injuries, sat tall, radiating the quiet strength that had defined her entire life. The judge's voice rang out, commanding attention. "We, the jury, find the defendant Ryan Holt." Every word slowed down, stretched, taut with tension. Ava's heart raced, every muscle in her body tense, waiting for the words that would determine the outcome of years of trauma and injustice. Guilty on all charges. The words hit like a thunderclap. Relief, disbelief, and raw emotion crashed over Ava all at once. Holt's jaw tightened, his face pale, the arrogance gone, replaced with the kind of fear that comes when you realize your actions have consequences. The courtroom erupted, some people cheering, others crying, but Ava and her mom simply held each other, tears streaming down their faces. Justice had finally been served, and the hatred that had almost destroyed their lives had been met with accountability. Outside, the crowd waiting to hear the verdict went wild. Protesters who had been rallying for weeks erupted in cheers, waving signs, chanting Tasha's name, celebrating not just a verdict, but a statement to the world. Black heroes belong. They deserve recognition. They deserve protection. They are not targets for hate masked as authority. Social media exploded with reactions. Hashtag Justice for Tasha trending worldwide. Posts celebrating the verdict, and videos replaying Holt's viral words juxtaposed with Tasha's heroic moments, showing the stark contrast between courage and cruelty. For Ava, the emotional roller coaster didn't end there. Walking out of the courthouse, she felt a mix of fear, relief, and empowerment. The man who had tried to erase her mom's life had been stopped, held accountable, and publicly shamed. But the memories, the trauma of seeing someone she loved almost killed because of hate, would linger. She clung to her mom, feeling the beat of her heart, proof that she was alive, proof that the fight against hate had won this round. The Army also finalized its internal proceedings. Holt was officially terminated, and his career in law enforcement was permanently over. The statement read, "Actions driven by prejudice and hate have no place in our ranks." We honor Tasha Reynolds' service, bravery, and courage, and reaffirm our commitment to justice and equality. For once, the title that had gone viral, "Racist Cops Shot a Black Army Surgeon, Then the U.S. Army Ended Their Careers Instantly," was more than just a headline. It was reality. Holt's words, his actions, his hatred had been met with immediate, undeniable consequences. Media coverage continued, highlighting Tasha's recovery and Ava's resilience. Interviews focused not just on the shooting, but on what it represented. The ongoing struggle against systemic racism, the bravery required to survive it, and the power of public accountability. Commentators and activists emphasized that while one guilty verdict couldn't erase centuries of injustice, it was a step in the right direction. Holt had been exposed, condemned, and punished, and the public had witnessed that actions fueled by racism would not go unchecked. Back at home, Ava finally let herself breathe. Her mother, hero and survivor, wrapped her in a tight hug. "We made it, baby girl," Tasha whispered, tears in her eyes. They saw the truth, and justice was done. But remember, we gotta keep fighting. Always. Ava nodded, feeling a mixture of sorrow, triumph, and the lingering weight of the fear she'd lived through. Holt's hate hadn't just targeted her mom. It had tried to erase the courage, the legacy, and the future. But that attempt had failed, and now they had a victory to hold on to. The emotional sting of the story, the takeaway, was clear. Racism, raw and unfiltered, can be lethal. It can target heroes, mothers, children, and civilians alike. But it can also be exposed, confronted, and condemned. The viral clip, the courtroom, the protests, and the media coverage all combined to ensure that hate didn't get the final word. Tasha Reynolds' life, her bravery, and her legacy had been threatened, but they endured. Holt's words, "Shut your mouth, girl, you don't belong in that uniform," would now serve as a chilling reminder of hate, but also a testament to the power of justice, accountability, and courage. As Ava watched her mom slowly recover, surrounded by love, support, and a nation acknowledging the injustice, she understood the lesson deeply. Bravery alone doesn't protect you from hatred, but the truth, once exposed, can bring justice. Holt had tried to erase Tasha, to assert his hatred, to silence a black hero. But the world saw him for what he was. And in the end, justice wasn't just served, it resonated, echoed, and reminded everyone that courage, even in the face of pure racism, is never invisible.